Good afternoon, everybody. Father Jason here, coming to you live from the Church of the Nativity in Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia. We're continuing our journey through Luke chapter by chapter, and today we're going to cover Luke chapter 20 and chapter 21. Jesus has done his triumphal entry into Jerusalem, and now he's teaching in the temple. And basically, that's where the scene is for both of these chapters. Starts off with a bit of let's make a deal with the Pharisees. They say, tell us by whose authority you do this. And Jesus says, well, if you can answer a question for me, then I'll answer your question. And he asks them, was John the Baptist a prophet from a prophet? And they don't know how to answer, because if they answer yes, then the people will be like, well, why didn't you follow? And if they say no, then the people will be upset because the people did believe that John was a prophet. So they were sort of caught. Jesus catches them at their own game, and they're not able to answer. And they say, we don't know. And so he says, well, then I'm not going to tell you. So, but then he goes into the parable of the vineyard, and then he gets questioned about whether he should pay taxes or not, and says the famous, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and render unto God what is God's. And then he's questioned by the Sadducees as well, and they're continually trying to catch him. And they're trying to get him to say something that they can use specifically to turn him over to the governor. That's in verse 20. It says, in order to trap him by what he said, so as to hand him over to the jurisdiction and the authority of the governor. Now, we know from the beginning of Luke's gospel that he is writing to a Hellenized audience, a Greek audience, maybe even a Roman audience. And so really Luke goes out of his way to try to lower Rome's involvement in the death of Jesus. We'll see that as we move on through the Passion narrative, but it's still there. The Pharisees and scribes could not kill Jesus. Rome kills Jesus, and Rome is the oppressor here. So we have to remember that, despite all the antagonism we've seen in the book between the Pharisees and Sadducees and Jesus, that doesn't mean anything. That doesn't ultimately bring him to his death. It's when Rome feels threatened that he is executed. So now it certainly didn't help that Jesus was angering the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the scribes and the other religious leaders. That didn't help him in any way, but it is Rome that kills him. We need to keep that in mind as we move forward. So render under Caesar happens, then he's questioned by the Sadducees about the resurrection, and then at the end of the chapter he says, beware the scribes and the Pharisees who like to wear long robes, be greeted in the marketplace, and have positions of honor, but at the same time they don't help out widows and orphans. They are not fulfilling what the law of Moses was about. If you go back and we read the Torah, we find that there's lots of things in the law of Moses that are about the care of the alien, the widow, the orphan, the poor, those that would be deemed marginal on the community. There was protections for them. And so despite their outward, we're going to be very, very pious and follow the rules very strictly, they were missing the point of the fact that they were judged by caring for their neighbor. That's the law of Moses is about the whole community, and that means everyone. And we fail at that too. So we need to be careful that we're not too harsh on the Pharisees and the Sadducees, because we do that too. We have our society set up in a way that it is not equitable for everyone, and not everyone is taken care of within our society. So we fall prey to that as well. No matter how pious we might be here in the Bible Belt in the South, we still have a lot of economic disparity, and we're still not taking care of people as well as we could. And so we need to be careful how much we stand in judgment of the Pharisees and the Sadducees for that. Now, moving into chapter 21, he begins it with the story of the widow's mite, which is also another critique of the economically powerful. And then the rest of the chapter is Jesus predicting the destruction of the temple. Now, we got to remember, the Gospel of Luke was probably written after 70 AD. In 70 AD, the Romans sacked Jerusalem and destroyed the temple. There was a revolt. There was a Jewish revolt against the Roman occupiers, and Rome squashed it forcefully and destroyed the temple. So for the readers of this gospel, when it was written down, that was a very fresh thing. So Jesus predicting that you rejected me and this is what happens, they saw the destruction of Jerusalem, and they saw the destruction of the temple as the fulfillment of Jesus's prediction. So that happens in the rest of 20. So that's the two chapters, chapter 20 and chapter 21. We'll get into tomorrow, chapter 22, when we get the Last Supper, also known as the Lord's Supper, and what we call Eucharist or communion in the Episcopal Church. So I hope you stick around for chapter 22 tomorrow. We're getting really close to the end, and Christmas Eve is coming. I hope you have enjoyed this journey through Advent, chapter by chapter, through the Gospel of Luke. I do hope if you have questions or comments, you'll post them here as well, and we'll keep the conversation going. I want to wish you a wonderful last few days of Advent. I hope you have a Merry Christmas. We would love for you to join us for our Christmas Eve service. It's at 6 p.m. That on the 24th. At 5:45, we'll have a choral prelude. Our choir is going to sort of set the mood for the evening with some wonderful Christmas anthems. In the middle of the service, we'll be having a Christmas carol sing-along. I hope you'll come and sing out for that as well. And then at the end of the service, we'll do our candlelit singing of Silent Night, as is traditional here. Our kids' choir is singing. We're going to have brass and musicians, and it's just going to be a glorious and wonderful evening on the 24th at 6 p.m. I hope you'll come join us here at the Church of the Nativity in Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia. In the meantime, remember that God loves you more than you could possibly imagine.